The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Sharleen Gatcha is an energy professional with over 25 years of experience in the electricity industry. Sharleen recently joined Hardline Engineering as the Vice President, Business Development. I first met Sharleen in 2019 when she joined in on one of our Candy Community workshops for in-house and do-it-yourself event planners called Planning with Vision, an event planner's vision boarding workshop. At the time, she was just in the middle of founding her new initiative called Women and Power. It was set to be a nonprofit organization that would provide community-driven support to women that worked in and with the power industry. She also knew to be successful, she would need to open the doors to like-minded men who could support the community as allies. The organization that was established in 2019 has since developed into a community of over 300 members and now provides opportunities for members to connect, exchange ideas, share information, learn more about the industry, mentor each other, and communicate industry news and events, challenges, and opportunities. Sharleen has a passion for developing meaningful connections, and in her spare time, she can often be found organizing, planning, and attending events of many different kinds. That, together with her positive energy and influence, might be why we have so much fun when we get the chance to visit. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome again to the Connector Next Door. I've got Sharleen Gatcha here. She has been a friend through a couple of workshops that I've been doing here at Candy Event Consulting. And we were just talking before I pressed record, and I had forgotten that's actually where we first met, was at one of the vision boarding workshops here at the Downtown Library here in Calgary. We want to talk today about who you are as a connector, how you show up for your community, and how that has shown up in all of your life. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm happy to be here. Excited to have this conversation.
So maybe to start, the idea of connection is really fluid for you. It's something that is just part of your life, and it might seem like a simple question, but I'd love to just start with, what does connection mean to you?
Connection is really important to me, and for me, it's not just kind of on the surface. It's about making those deeper connections in my life. Is really, I'm interested to meet people and to learn about them and to have, conversations about what kind of makes people tick and live to serve others and to leave the world a little better than you found it. So I think about that in terms of my connections with others. I always like to bring energy to those conversations and leave them feeling a little bit more boosted up than they were when we kind of started the conversation.
Yeah. And curiosity that you come to those conversations with, this idea of what makes them tick. What is the most intriguing part of that for you? Like when you're listening to somebody and you're hearing their story.
For me, it's almost like you said, flow, like an energy flow that I get. And you get that feeling when you're really connected to someone. I'm looking for two things, sort of, I would say, what are the commonalities in us? I like to, share experiences and kind of feed off each other in those conversations. And then the other part of it is learning. Like I've always been a lifelong learner, and I've always wanted to learn from people and from conversations. How have they handled a specific situation or, in their lives, and how can I learn from that, or how can we learn from each other and kind of build on those connections? So I find, a lot of the connections I've had throughout my life, and I've had many, I'll meet someone like you at an event, and it's easy for me to continue that relationship with, being able to have some of those deeper conversations and discuss things that get to, family and work and other interests and things like that. So you're able to kind of keep the flow going in those relationships.
Yeah. And I think too, it's not just what you do, because you work a lot in a professional environment where you're bringing together professional women that are working within your industry, but then also to have those questions on who you are. I think that's where it gets really sometimes surprising and interesting, and where we find those common denominators that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise. Maybe in some cases we work in the same industry, but unless we really do a little bit more questioning and digging and asking questions and listening, that's a bit of a lost art, the listening that you do, where we're able to actually bring people into that conversation and say, I really want to know who you are, not just what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes through our career lives, especially in networking, I'm just building a networking workshop right now, and a lot of the conversations that happen in a networking context are, what do you do? Who do you work? Who do you do that for? Who do you work for? And why? And, you know, some of those pieces that, if we took just one more step further to have that conversation on who that person is and what makes them tick, as you say, I think sometimes we might be surprised with the answers, and in my case, in my world, some of the friendships that are built over time, because you now are meeting at sort of at a different level. You've got a different type of connection.
Yeah, there's so much more to people than what we do and what, our title or, those. So to be able to dig in, down into that. And I think part of that, I mentioned to you in our conversation prior to the podcast, how much I love Brene Brown. I mean, she talks about vulnerability, and I think that it takes, for me, I found that me opening up and being vulnerable in some conversations, and actually, I'm struggling with this, or, I'm going through this in my personal life, has really opened up, and at the appropriate time, not to just kind of throw that out there, but in the flow of a conversation, really opens the door for that deeper connection that allows that back from the other person, right? So that's where I find, if you're willing to take that sort of first step, you can often get, as you mentioned, things you wouldn't have otherwise learned about someone. And in the context of my work with Women in Power, talking to women and really getting beneath the surface in terms of what's going on in their work lives and what are the challenges that they have, and how can we help with those, and how can we share in that. And I've had, really heartwarming stories back from women who've said, I didn't know anybody else was experiencing this, or I didn't know that, I thought I was the only one, or, that just because they were so afraid to speak out about some of their challenges, where we can be open and we can share, all of our stories and grow together.
Yeah. And the beautiful part of creating that platform where you're being that example of being curious and asking the questions and going a little bit deeper, and having people identify that there's something about that they've experienced themselves, or they're in that same space. Tell us a little bit about Women in Power, the platform that you've built, the community you're building has really become, over the last year and a half, I guess it's been about a year and a half, where you have been inviting women to come to the table, giving people a voice, having the opportunity for them to come to the group as a professional, but at the same time, bring them their whole selves to the table. So tell us a little bit about Women in Power.
Sure. Yeah. So it started Women in Power actually from my own sort of experience in the industry. And we know as women, it hasn't been an easy go. COVID probably didn't help with, all the additional work at home. And, they call that the double shift. And so a lot of us had to do that at the same time. And I think, timing wise wasn't what we expected, but really worked out very well in terms of it being a time when women really needed that extra, encouragement and boost. So to be able to join us in a virtual sense and have that type of support was great. But, on a kind of more higher level, I created Women in Power to support women in the power community. So electricity, and kind of the pun on the name, Women in Power, but also to empower women. So we've got a few great slogans, but one of them is that empowered women empower women. So, we're finding that the more we speak out about some of the challenges we're having, and even just to create a safe space and a forum for women to connect in ways that they may not have been able to otherwise outside of their organizations, Sometimes it's been a great way for women to connect, and we don't have many opportunities within our industry. Most of them are technical, conferences and those kinds of things. So it's more as you said, the business side of things, and it's sometimes hard to talk at a bit of a deeper level. So we're excited to be able to offer opportunities for women to do that. I mean, there is a technical component as well to the work we do. So we do a lot of sharing we have panel discussions, we have learning sessions, awareness more around I call them the human skills as opposed to the soft skills side of things. And then we have the technical skills, that kind of thing. And we're doing, just in September, we've got a couple of events that we're doing around the truth and reconciliation and cultural awareness as well. So excited to start to dig into some of these issues that are at the forefront of, the work that we do in the industry, and then to build some connection around that as well. So 350 members strong right now.
Wow.
And growing. So it's been great. It's been a really interesting ride.
Yeah. And so where are your members coming from?
Yeah, mostly within Alberta, because that's sort of where we focused our energy. We do have some from outside of Alberta, and we've actually had some speakers from BC. Hydro Energy spoke at one of our panel discussions recently, just about, we're talking about the evolution of the energy industry, right? We're transitioning from traditionally coal-based to more renewable energies. So that was an interesting discussion. And so being able to be part of those discussions as well, but finding, just back to the conversation around connection. The other thing I love about connection is it's, you talk about 6 degrees of separation and all of that, but there are so many, I've just making a connection with one person and how that leads to a connection with another person or another, and you just kind of follow the dots. And sometimes it's amazing what comes back in terms of, how that happens. We had a situation recently, we post on our blog monthly. One of our board members will do a write-up about a book or a TED Talk or something like that. And we actually had one posted about a woman who'd done a TED Talk and then subsequently wrote a book. And she actually contacted us and was interested in the work that we did and how it followed sort of the work she did. And her and I spoke on the phone about involving her in an upcoming event. And I think we spent half the time or more than half the time in girlfriend discussion. Like, we really connected because of the work, but we had similar backgrounds and children the same age. So it just moves me how connection can sort of go in, any one of different directions and where that takes you.
And that it doesn't necessarily have to be a slog.
Yeah.
I think some of us that have grown up in the prairies, and when you're walking through the snow, and there are times, and I'll say probably the last few days for me, starting a big program here and kind of getting some of the details and logistics together and all of that. And if I don't watch myself, I can feel like sort of being in that sort of step by step, or if you're walking, through water and you're just trying to make some progress. But interesting that you bring up that flow and how it doesn't necessarily have to be difficult, and that one connection can lead to the next and the next. And in my meditation this morning, one of the readings was about stepping onto flow and allowing those things to naturally happen. And I believe that to my core. But sometimes when we get in our heads, and I don't know if you're like this, but for many of the planners that are probably listening, we get in the doing of the work and of those connections. But the idea of really allowing ourselves to step onto what's already happening, that there's already a flow that we can connect to. And then if we follow that, there's still work to be done. There still is the nuts and bolts of putting everything together. But the other part of that is allowing ourselves to be surprised and delighted by what comes next. Like you're saying with this author, who knows where that could lead? If we have the courage and the boldness to step into that and just say, I'm willing to surrender to what that looks like, there can be some beautiful things along that path.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're finding, that's when when you speak about that, it reminds me of, we've had so many members who, as I said, felt alone sometimes in their, their struggles, and they've stepped on to that, and they've, but become, been part of our discussions. We've done some breakout sessions in, some of our earlier meetings where, virtual meetings where we got to dig in a little bit. And then we just, at the beginning of the year, started a peer mentoring circle program. So we have about 50 of our members, or had about 50 of our members, split up into about 8 groups, and they would meet kind of monthly or more frequently to just talk about whatever topics. We didn't want to prescribe anything. So they talked about whatever they wanted, or felt was important for them to talk about. And we've heard so many amazing stories back where everyone has said, I had no idea that this, what I've learned, and the group, the friendships and the connections that I've made was possible. I can't believe, like, this was what was holding me back for so long. And I can't get enough of it now. Right. And so we had these groups that were supposed to end their time together in June. And they're like, yeah, no, we're staying. We're not,
That's great.
so, right. So to me, that was what I wanted to create when I created Women in Power, was that feeling, that sense of, whether that's belonging or connection, or, for them to be able to see that and carry that on. And we're bringing in another cohort now in September. So it'll be interesting to see, what the next group does and how that moves along. But again, and there are men involved. I mean, our platform is to encourage men to, come to us as members, to support us as allies. So, we really do need to work together in, I call it gender partnership, to support each other, right? I think we'll all be better off if we learn sort of the advantages of those partnerships. So
beautiful. And we will ask, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are curious and want to learn more, but we'll get to that later on in the conversation. Before we get there, what is it about connection for you? Because I know you have, in our conversations before today, we were talking about how you are that natural connector, that you've always had this ability and desire to connect people together. I'm curious, and always an interesting conversation around you as a young person. So where were you when you were younger? Might have been young as a kid, or maybe, as you were getting into your career. How were you showing up as that connector for the people around you?
I came from a very large family. So I spent most of my childhood, around lots of adults and lots of adult conversations and parties. And that was just, I think that's where I kind of got my desire for it. I got my, I don't know, my addiction, maybe let's call it an addiction. But I was always the party planner. I was always and I've always been, even in my family, the harmonizer, whenever we had large family gatherings, I loved themes. So I would do themes for things for Halloween parties. And so I got into party planning when I was probably in junior high, right? Doing all the whatever parties we needed to plan for dances and things, when we used to be able to have those back then, and Halloween. And I think probably my first professional gig, if you will, I ran for school council president, and I lost. And I was so upset. And I remember the woman that she was one of my social teachers, and she said, you know what, I have a way better job for you. We need you to be our social activities coordinator. And so I got to create this big calendar on the wall. And every month I'd, put together a plan for all these social activities, and I would put them all on the calendar and round everybody up and get everybody involved in whatever was going on. So I do remember a dance where a DJ didn't show up. So that was unfortunate, but you can only plan for so much. But,
it's kind of a pivotal part of the dance.
Yeah, right. So anyways, it's like, and then it was in the days before you had cell phones. So you couldn't even call a parent. Parents dropped you off and came back 3 hours later. So I think we got board games out, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do till our parents came back. It was quite something. But so lots of fun with those types of things. And then I just kind of carried that forward into high school, and even in my life in general, like always did theme parties and neighborhood gatherings. I did neighborhood block party, like you name it. Like I was like, it's almost like an addiction. I always had some reason to have a party, and I made sure. So I've done, and just most recently did a big party for my 50th and had, I was super excited that we could do that. I was, at the end of COVID when I could get a large group together and plan that. So it's just been something that's always been, my family calls me Martha Stewart. I mean, I love beautiful things and I love, to set things out. So, yeah.
And you need a place to do that. So why not plan a few parties and dances and all of that? It's funny because people like you and where there is that drive to create too. So it's part of it is the connection, and part of it is that Martha Stewart in you, that things could be beautiful. And as you lay things out, honestly, its own gift, because when things are well put together and they sound exciting and they look beautiful, and you've got sort of that atmosphere atmosphere of engagement, that you've kind of created this space for people to now be part of something. That's such a gift to the world if you're able to orchestrate something that people can come to and they know it'll be well done. They're going to feel great being there. And not having the DJ is such a great example of you being you, and you're not saying, okay, everyone go home because we don't have a DJ. You're pulling out the games, you're trying to find something else to do, you're all together. So what else are you going to be able to include in that to make it work so that it's a great experience for the people?
Yeah. And that's the key part, right? My family would give me a hard time. You don't have to everything, make everything look so perfect. We don't mind. I know. I'm like, I know, but when it does, like, it's not so much for me. It's from an event planning experience, what that creates for the people that are experiencing it, right? You're creating that beauty, you're creating that atmosphere, you're creating that, if it's a theme or whatever, it's for the enjoyment of others, so that's sort of for me. I love to see the smile on people's faces. I love for people to say, oh my gosh, you put so much work into this, right? And because that reflects back on how much those people mean to me, and that's how sort of I feel about it in that, serving others piece that I told you about in that earlier quote. Why I do it is, I think when I connect that back to Women in Power is how much the experience they have because of what we've created means to them. That's what I do it for, not to say, I love to say we have so many members, but what I'd like to say is, of those 350 members, how many, have such a, have how much it's changed their, outlook on the industry or some experience they've had. I've had in me, like, what's your goal, around Women in Power? Like, where do you want to go? Where do you want to take this? And, back to my point, it's like one step at a time. We've got lots of plans and we're trying not to bite off more than we can chew. But, I had said before we started all of this, if I had one person that said to me, I wouldn't be where I am without you guys, at the end of, a year or two or whatever, that would be enough for me. And now I'm just blown away by, the impact that we've had and the feedback that we're getting from the really involved members that we do have. So,
well, and to have that very keen attention to the care. So if I feel cared for every time I show up, if I'm in a group and that feeling is I'm seen and I'm heard and I'm cared for because of how it's orchestrated or how it's designed and the care you put into the planning, it only will grow because and they'll trust that you have a plan, that you're going somewhere. Yeah. There are many, many ways that we can expand and scale a community and a great idea and a group of people. But if I'm not feeling cared for in the moment, if I'm not feeling like you actually see me and you understand some of those challenges I'm going through, I may not hang around long enough to see your, 5-year strategy play out or where you're going to be next year. Whatever it is, whatever idea or whatever great, inspiration when you want to give to the world, if you're not actually showing up in that moment, knowing that there will be people watching for the first time ever, and they're making a judgment call or they're deciding if they feel like they belong or this is where they could belong in that moment, it's just part of you. It's what you want to, how you want to show care to the group. that's where I think people are probably waking up and saying, this could be a place for me where I could be part of something and actually belong.
Mm-hmm. And we do, and I think we think about that. I mean, we don't talk about it in those terms, but every event we put on is an opportunity to shine, right? So we really do put a lot of care and attention into that. And I do have to give a shout out to my events and programs, committee chair, Elena Eifler. She's just, without her, in just her meticulous details and planning, we've been so fortunate to make the connections we have and to build the programs and the calendar we do. But at the same time, we've shifted things a lot. We had different plans for different things, and you and I talked about we were hoping for an in-person event in September. We're going to push that to October, and we'll see what happens then. But we have. We put a plan down, but we're also, I think from an event planning perspective, you've got to be, I don't know if smart enough is the right word, but agile enough to be willing to make changes and to go off in a different direction if another opportunity comes along.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, and having a team. So this might be a great encouragement for some people that are out there, that you are not doing this alone. And you have a team around you. You've built over the last year, you've built people that are passionate about the work that you are wanting to do. And that also creates another dynamic of connection. What has that looked like for you, building a team around Women in Power this last year?
Yeah, so we've got a board, and again, volunteers, right? So we do what we can in the time that we have, and lots of busy women. We have a couple of men on our board as well, and then we're building our kind of community of volunteers. So we have had, that's been an exciting part of it, to have our members reach out and want to be part of the action, if you will. So hope to see, I think it's, a bit more difficult for people, well, and certainly as we talked about with women during COVID and working from home and all the, challenges that brought, I'm hoping we'll see more of that. And we're noticing more of that as we, come out of things, so to speak. So looking forward to building that community as well. And, it's for those individuals and volunteers, it's using the skills that they have, and for them to recognize I'm really good at this, or I'd like to learn more about this, and to help women grow in that aspect. And also on the, we talk about, as I said, we're here to support, mentor, encourage, and empower women who, wouldn't otherwise have a voice sometimes. So to be able to bring them together and to be able to have those conversations and create that space has been one of our greatest accomplishments.
Bringing together Women in Power, doing your own work, because this isn't all you do in your day, and then you as a connector in your life, are you still seeing that you're the one that pulls together the party or the reunion, or are you seeing that still just in your personal life as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, that reminds me, I did family reunions in the past. I've done it all, right. I'm always, and in fact, I considered event planning at one point, but then I thought, I don't want to make it a job because then it won't be fun anymore. Yeah, I do in my personal life. And as you mentioned, in my professional life, I'm in a business development role. And so I get the opportunity to make connections on a regular basis, but I'm always taking the time, even though it is business conversation, taking the time to learn about that individual and to develop a relationship outside of that. That allows me to, and I'm proud to say that I have a lot of connections, and a lot of them have been long-term, people I've known professionally for decades and 20 plus years. And, we always get together and talk about kids, or how lives have sort of transpired, and not just about the professional aspect of things. So,
and over time, as I think we get more comfortable with bringing connections in our lives, connecting over time, the line between professional and personal starts to blur. And in some ways, I've had people say, well, then you're working all the time. And I say, well, actually, then I feel like I'm myself all the time. I'm able to show up as who I am. And it's not that every client becomes a friend or every friend becomes a client. It's not like that. It's really this opportunity to be who we are in all of these situations in our lives.
Like you said, I think that bringing your whole self, and that to me, and I'm willing to, again, be curious and learn about another person. So they, so I understand them, like I said, in a deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
You bring your life to work and your work to home, and it all crosses over. And how can we make that work? Everybody is.
Yeah. And for women in particular, and I think that sometimes women in the past and I, in my old world where it was in the 80s and the 90s, and there was a very clear separation for you to move forward in your career, we needed to sort of hide, the fact that you were a mom or that you had other things going on in life, or you had to be somewhere at, a certain time for a recital or something.
Oh.
And I think it seems like there's a warmth now, that there's more to life than that. I'm a very driven personality. I've always been, but I've also had to juggle life at the same time as my work. And some of the most, I think, inspirational people in my life are the ones that are open about it, still moving mountains, still out there doing the work, but not afraid to say that they have a life and a family, and that there's this integration of who we are and what we do. So appreciate the conversation today. And before we're wrapping up for today, could you maybe share with us what you feel a more connected world would look like?
That's probably going to sound really idealistic, but I do, that's one thing. I mean, I thought I'd taken away from COVID too. I mean, my patience and my, willingness to even just reach out and chat with someone in line. I mean, I've always sort of been that way, but, we talk about, there's so many opportunities for disconnection, or a distraction. I know social media hasn't been a great help for that. I just think that the more individuals that would be willing to take that opportunity and reach out and make those connections, and take some time to volunteer in their community, or to reach out to a neighbor, or talk to a family member about something that might be challenging them, as opposed to trying to avoid those conversations. I just think that, the health and wellness of our society would improve just so greatly. We're not yelling at each other from our cars, or those types of reactions
over social media,
or whatever, behind a screen, right?
Yeah.
I just think, if we all kind of looked at connection as that opportunity to both improve ourselves and learn from others, and have that sense of curiosity, how much different I think we would see the world.
Yeah.
And that's how I want to see the world. And I try and see the world. And sometimes it's hard. Like you said, sometimes you feel like you're up to your waist in snow, and it's like, this is not what I wanted, but then you got to kind of brush yourself off and take a breath and realize, okay, this is just, part of the process. And today isn't a good day, or, and take a different direction and see where that takes you.
When you mentioned sort of talking to somebody in line, I think you were talking about, like, if you're lining up for food or coffee or something like that. I'm more of a private person that way. My mom is the one that will talk to everybody in line and know everything about them by the time we buy our coffee.
Yeah, mine too.
And I think as a kid, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. But it is a gift to the people that she's talking to, and I see them light up, and I see them being seen. And if there was more of that in the world, and sometimes it's going out of our own comfort zone and our own little bubble, to say that there's, even if it's a moment, even if it's just like a 5-second conversation, or just a hello, and looking someone in the eye now, I think is so important. There's something to that can start that ripple effect.
Susan David says, I love her. She's written a book about emotional agility. And she says there's a South African greeting, and the meaning of it, I can't say what, I don't know how the greeting, but she says the meaning of it is, I see you, and I see you, and in seeing you, you see me. So it's sort of like this greeting that is, it's got a deeper meaning. And so I love that you kind of keyed on that. And, I always think it's not oftentimes when there is that, something doesn't go right for someone, or someone is in a bad place, it's not necessary. Like, it's not, I have to keep thinking to myself, it's not about me, right? It's about what's going on for them and what they're projecting back. So that's something else I've learned in this, COVID time, that's really helped me not hold on to sometimes some of those negative connections, because there are some, as much as you strive, that there isn't. But that would be my parting thought.
Beautiful. No, that's great. Well, thank you so much for the time to chat. There's going to be more to come, more conversations to come, and so many great conversations happening through Women in Power. How can people get involved?
We have a page on LinkedIn, so they can look for us, and it's Women with the + Power, and that was deliberate as well, again, around positive energy and that aspect of things, as opposed to using the word, which sometimes makes us hard to find. But we do post on our social media platforms, both on, not both, on LinkedIn and lots on Instagram. We do have a Twitter page, developing a Facebook page, but I am on LinkedIn as well. And, if they're interested, back to the question you'd asked, we're not all within the power industry. It is a lot of sort of groups and organizations that provide services into the power industry as well. So people are welcome to become a member and learn more about us. We have a webpage, www.womenpower.ca, and they can learn a little bit about what we do as well. So lots of connections there.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. We will encourage people to step on the flow this week. Have the courage, the boldness, just do it and see what connections happen this week. And share with us. I would love to hear from those of you that are listening, and what does connection mean to you, and how maybe you've put that into practice for yourself this week. Thanks so much, Sharleen. Have a great day.
You too.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.